Welcome to Plot Twist Radio, the show where creativity, storytelling, and the unpredictable path of the creative life all collide. I'm your host, Erin Egnatz. Welcome back to Plot Twist Radio, the show where creative lives take unexpected turns, and the stories behind the stories are just as powerful as the final page. Today's guest is someone I'm super excited to have on. We met through the paranormal community when I was a guest on his show, Middle Aged and Creeped Out. And since then, I've watched his creative journey take a real plot twist. He's an occupational therapist, a longtime storyteller, and now, officially, a published author with Phantom Publishing, writing under the pen name Jack Wylde. His debut book, The Age of Imagination, Awakening the Dreamer Within, is part inspiration, part callback to your inner child, and honestly, it's the kind of book that makes you pause and go, wait, when did I stop dreaming like that? In this conversation, we talk about the moment he finally gave himself permission to write, how the paranormal world helped shape his imagination, the meaning behind his pen name, and why sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply create, especially when life reminds you how fragile it can be. So settle in, get cozy, and let's jump into it. And welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me. Would you take a moment to introduce yourself?
Erin, thank you for having me. And my name is Shawn, otherwise known as Jack Wylde, right? And I'm from Plainfield, Indiana, and I'm a new author with Phantom Publishing. So I'm the father of four, married. I'm an occupational therapist by trade. So that's a little bit about me. I am, like I said, a brand new author, and this is new ground for me. This is a huge honor to be on your show.
Oh, well, I'm so glad to have you, especially because we've known each other for a while.
Yes,
So,
yeah, right through the
yeah,
paranormal field, right?
exactly. And so I love when worlds collide, So let's kind of start there. We met
Okay.
through Todd when I was a guest on your show, Middle Aged and Creeped Out, which, by the way, is an excellent show. Go listen to it, guys. It's amazing. But that was before publishing was even on the table. At that time, did you ever imagine we'd be sitting here talking about this?
No, not really. Like, in my wildest dreams, maybe. It's funny because I've always liked to write even when I was younger, and it was something that I just kept in in the possibility, but I love to do it for myself. I would journal or I'd write stories, and I had these daydreams and things like that, and I had, journal books of, like, all these different characters and things. I'm like, "What am I ever gonna do with this?" But life pushed me into this feeling of, "No, you're a therapist, you take care of people, and this is how you do it," and, there's not really any time for that other stuff, so I just pushed it away, but, so yeah, this is uh, I would have loved to have said, "Yeah, this is a reality." So for this to be a reality, it just is almost like living in a dream.
Yes, I felt the same way. So, like you said, you've been writing stories in some form since you were young. What kept that creative spark alive during the years when writing kind of had to stay in the background?
Well, what's funny is, I'm a bit of a storyteller anyway, and my wife would say that. She's like, "Oh my gosh," like, I tell a story and I would elaborate, and sometimes I know I'm doing it and sometimes I don't. Like, it's funny because 'cause she'll be like, "That's not how that went," and I'm like, "But that's how it plays back in my head." So, I just do it naturally, and then the other thing, this sounds really strange, and I did talk about this a little bit on the podcast, but I think the year was 2010. I tried to go back and think. It was either 2010, 2011. It was somewhere in between we have 4 children. It was, like, right in between having those kids. I have a friend of mine named Mary. She's a now retired nurse. She's a case manager, and she and I used to have the most wonderful conversations, and one time she told me, she said, and I know she doesn't mind me telling this, I have a bit of a psychic background in my family. And I was like, "Oh, really?" And she's like, "Yeah, I do card readings and things like that." And I told her, I'm like, "Man, I've never had anything done like that. I've heard about it." And so I was so interested. She's like, "Well, someday if we have an extra minute, we'll go and do that." So we went up into like this part of the hospital that didn't even like function anymore, and, she read me, and so she was like, "You have these kids that are, like, really, really strong presences and powers," I was like we were still kind of in the middle of having kids, and, she talked about my wife, and she talked about because one thing is even though she knew me and we'd had conversations, there were things that she did not know about me, and so she would and I kinda thought I'm a skeptical by nature, so I took it all with a grain of salt, but when she started talking, I was like, "Oh my gosh, she's really hitting home." And she told me, she goes, "You're full of stories. Like, there's so many stories in you." And she said, "I think you're gonna be a writer." And this, and she said, "I think your first book is gonna come out in 2019." And I was like, "2019?" That felt like forever after that, or forever away. She goes, "Yeah, that's just how I feel." So 2019 comes and goes, and of course, what hits is COVID right after that. And so that kind of threw things. But at that time, I was talking in talks with my friend, Todd, about doing a podcast. And so when we started the podcast, I got to thinking about her telling me that. And I was like, oh, she just, it was a podcast, but we didn't know what a podcast was back then. And so in that, basically, this is long story short. 2023, I had a medical issue where my son had to save my life, and do CPR on me. After that, I was taken out of the occupational therapy, uh, you know, game, I guess you say, and I didn't know whether I was going to be able to work with patients anymore. So it was one of those things where I legitimately would just go around here like scared to death I was going to fall asleep and not wake up and not know what to do. I didn't have work, and they would say, "Oh, just relax, chill out, have fun." And what I did is a couple different works that I had, which Age of Imagination is one of them. I picked up, I started writing, and I told my wife, I said, I'm starting to write because I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to go out and work with people again. And she's like, don't talk like that. You're an occupational therapist. You're not a writer. And that really stuck with me because I thought, well, why can't I be both? But she wasn't meaning it to say, "Hey, you're not good at this or you can't do this." It was, "Don't sell yourself like short that you're gonna get back from this and you're gonna be able to help people." So her intentions were good, but I secretly kind of just went back and reverted into myself and thought, I'm just going to write, and if I finish this stuff and nothing ever happens, at least I've done it, and at least I know I can have something to rely on to help calm me in these storms that feel, like, oh my gosh, I could die. They felt like overwhelming. And so that's what I did, and that's why I started working on Age of Imagination, and then my next book that's coming out, I started kind of revamping that and thinking about it because it was something that I dreamed back in 2018. So, like I said, some of this stuff comes to me just in daydreams, and some of it has come to me in dreams. So that's a very condensed version of what has happened to me, but that gave me the strength to allow myself, like, I mean, if you could be dead tomorrow, you should probably do what you feel compelled to do. And it took a lot of, you know, telling those, what are they, mind demons that say you can't do it. Who do you think you are? I have wrestled those for decades now. And these last couple of years, I just said, let's see, and I'm not going to listen to you anymore. And so that's been huge. And I've had the support of you, Erin, and then some other friends that I've just told them, like, I don't know if I can do this. And it's like, look, Shawn, you speak it, so you can write it. Just write how you think and how you talk and how you dream. So that's what I did.
Yeah, and it is amazing, it really is, and I'm not just saying that because I own Panda Publishing. I love the book, and as you were sending me the chapters, each one felt like an inspiration, more so than just, kind of like a not even like a self-help, but it just felt like an inspiration, and I felt better about myself, because I kind of looked at my own imagination, and it's such a powerful piece, and I am so happy for you. The Age of Imagination, like I was saying, it feels like a declaration in a way. What does the title mean to you personally?
So now that I've written it and I look at it, I think about it as a movement, and the thing is it's not me saying, "Hey, I figured all this out and here you go. Here's all the answers you've ever looked for." What it is a return to yourself and a return to innocence. I didn't have the other part of the title, Awakening the Dreamer Within, that my sister actually was playing around with the cover, and she said, she put that on there, and she's like, "Oh, yeah, I thought that sounded kinda good." And I was like, I like that because it really connects everything." So I have to credit my sister with the subtitle, but The Age of Imagination has been with me since I started thinking about this concept back in, like I said, the 2000s is when this was in my mind, and I kept thinking, "Somebody will write about this." This world's gonna eventually come back to our childhood and our innocence. And somebody will write this. I don't need to do this. And the more that, as the years pass, it's like, no, nobody's going to do this. And I wrote the first 5 chapters, and those chapters you see are basically what I've had. Now they're revamped and they're reworked and things, but that's what I've had. Those were the first core that I definitely wanted to sit there and write for myself. And especially 5, which is the soul of play, and that's the occupational therapist in me and the importance of play. in our life, we have to balance ourselves rest, work, and play, as what I feel like. So, but to me, this is just really about returning. That's the on the cover is my 12-year-old self. That's supposed to be me, and that is just that's what I go back to when I think about like aging for any of us. It's aging happens when we aren't childlike, when we lose that ability to stay grounded in our foundational beliefs. And it doesn't mean that we don't grow up and that we don't mature. That's perfectly fine. That's going to happen no matter what. But to have that inner child should stay with us. I've worked with so many people that still have a beautiful inner child in their 80s, 90s, and hundreds, and that is, in my opinion, when you ask them what their secret is, secret in the sauce, they'll say, I play, I still have fun, I still imagine, I still, and it's like, oh, that's cool. And sometimes they don't even take good care of themselves physically. They're just able to keep that child inside alive. And I think that's a huge thing. So to me, that's where I felt like, having medical issues, I felt like, what is happening to me? And I just felt like I was becoming a fuddy duddy, just stuck in this stress cycle. I was in management at the time, and I thought, this isn't good, and I'm slowly dying. I even felt that way even before the emergent need, for me to take action or my son to take action. It was weighing on me heavy. So this is writing saved my life in a way. Besides all the other factors that have saved me, but this beauty inside of me is something that I'm very grateful for. I also am. I know it's a divine gift, and so that's why I feel like 46 years in, I better not waste it any longer. Like, I'm hoping to live to a ripe old age, and share a lot of the stories and things like that that I have in my mind and my heart. But yeah, so it's something that I'm very grateful for, and I want to remain humble because I know that, like I said, I feel like a conduit. This stuff kind of coming through me.
So you talk openly about the book being proof that hard things are worth doing. What part of this process challenged you the most?
I think having the bravery to be able to answer the question, "Who are you to say these things?" And for whatever reason, that is such a mind virus that now I look at it and I think, "Oh my gosh, how silly of me to even, like, consider that." But to get over that feeling that I wasn't enough was the hardest part. I also was scared, and my wife laughs at me now, but I was worried that she would look at this and be like, "I don't know how you're gonna do this." And instead, it was quite the opposite. She was just like, "I can't believe." I hid this from her basically from 2023 until I wanted to hide it until the actual physical book came out, but I couldn't do that. It was basically when it was announced that I was doing this, I set my kids and my wife down and said, "Hey, I'm gonna publish my first book. Isn't that exciting?" And they were ecstatic. And Jenna was so supportive. And that was a dumb thing too. That like I don't know why I ever thought that she would be anything but supportive. But I just wanted. I think there's that need. I think I've always had that. Is that need for somebody to be proud of me. And in this, I've realized it's okay to be proud of yourself first. And the only person you need to really make sure that you're satisfying is yourself, and then that spreads out to other people. Like since I was young, you always want your parents to be proud and your girlfriend or your friends, but most important is you. That's who needs to be um, you know content, because that's who you deal with, that's who you look at every single morning. I learned that too. It's very uncomfortable to look at yourself and like, okay, let's go do this, and hey, I love you, and to yourself. But that's something I've gotten better over the last few years too. It's like appreciating who's with you, who's your team, and that's you, yourself, and you.
Yes. Especially with writing, it's so hard to put yourself out there, at least the first time, initially, because usually most authors, that work is so personal and it means so much. And, you want that support system behind you. So it's fantastic that you have a wonderful support system. The name Jack Wylde, it's layered in meaning. Your grandfather, your dog, Gene Wilder, Oscar Wilde. How important was it for you to step into that name that already carried a story?
That's a tough one. And then so Wild also is the last name of a villain. Actually, he's more of a dark hero, is what I'm calling him, of the next story that I'm writing, Victor Wilde. So it's a big deal. Like I think about my grandfather, and he was a strong man in my eyes. World War II Army vet. He was a boxer. He all these things to me. When I was a kid, I just saw him as can do no wrong, and so that's a big deal. And his real name is Everett, but he was very proud of that name, Jack. And I was like, like John F. Kennedy. He went by Jack, and there's a lot of cool people that, Jack, the Giant Slayer. No, I'm kidding. But I always thought, and then naming my dog was a big deal because my wife liked that name too, but we just never used it for any of our sons or anything. And it's like, man, I like that name. And Wild is strong, and it's a little bit mysterious too. But it humbles me as well to carry that. And I've joked with a few people. They're like, "Do I have to call you Jack now?" And I was like, "No, you can still call me Sean." But I said, now, if somebody says you don't know Jack, and they're like, "No, I actually do know Jack. He's right over here." So,
Love that. So, I've had a few authors tell me that have a pen name that they feel a little different in that persona. I personally don't. I feel the same as Erin, as Eliza, but some don't. Do you feel different when you're writing as Jack versus Sean, or do they kind of blur together?
So I've had a little practice with this with the podcast and being, I'm Sean on the podcast, I'm Sean in life. And I joke about how there is a little bit of a persona in the podcast. And the funny thing is it's not really. If it's anything, it's the most authentic me. And I just talked to the guys about that, where it's like, oh, I go into Sean, podcast Sean, and but I laughed. I'm like, but that's really who I am, and that's at my highest energy, my truest self, and speaking what I know and how, using the humor that I feel comfortable in. So when I'm writing, if anything, as Jack Wylde, I am my most authentic self, and that is, to me, that's really really cool. That the best, and I talk about the Saturday morning feel. It's that Saturday morning feel wrapped in a cozy, comfy blanket that just came out of the dryer, and fuzzy slippers and a cup of coffee. It's just the best. It's just that feeling that everything's complete. So no, it's a beautiful thing to me.
So you co-host Middle Age and Creeped Out, which I mentioned before is one of my favorite shows. Everyone go listen. But how has paranormal storytelling influenced your imagination as a writer? Because, like, for me, just from the ghost hunting side of it, it helps me in my fiction writing. Maybe it's not so much a nonfiction, but it's, in the fiction, it creates these worlds that I can expand upon. So, do you
Yeah.
feel that way too?
I do. The funny thing is, so the biggest part of the paranormal, although I like being scared or looking into, I like to find the reasons and the answers. But I'm like you, like there's that piece that where you can't answer, and you're like, but that's what I want to know. That's what I want to understand. Why that's working that way. But the history of it is probably what I've enjoyed the most. And it's funny now, I wrote so age. What I want to do is I like the books that are helpful, to help people to really like stop and pause and think about their life. So that's Age of Imagination is huge with that. I'm working on another one that is more of a mental health book. In our podcast, we do a lot of mental health support, and that's very very important to me. And but the next book that I'm doing, and a lot of the books that I'm really thinking about are fiction books. And it's funny because the story that I dreamed, I've tried to tell it just straight, and it is a really cool story, but it's one that I feel like you've heard 1,000 times, maybe just wrapped in my own personal stuff. But I kept coming back and forth, and like, I need something to tie it together, and that's using something paranormal. And so I think a lot of my books, it's like, if you can't make things really happen in reality, at least not the way that we know how science and physics work right now, it's fun to tie a story together with something that's a little magical or a little mystical or paranormal. And so I'm finding that yes, that is helpful. And I do. So there's things that, like, from the podcast, you'll see an Age of Imagination, a little bit of me. There's one of my friends said, my gosh, you put a whole chapter on tapestry? Only you could do that. And I was like, "Good," but I say we're all tapestry. It's all tapestry, the good, the bad, and the indifferent. So it's just it has all bled together, which has been really cool. But yeah, so to answer your question, it has definitely helped me.
Has publishing this book changed how you see yourself, or no, not so much?
Not really. No, I kind of wondered. I thought, man, am I going to be stepping into some other reality and this and that and the other? And I do. People don't see me any different. There's a few people have reached out and like, well, now that you're famous, and I'm like, I'm not famous. I'm just Sean. And I do not have any major, or there's no Rogan beating down my door or anything yet. But and which is fine. I'm honestly fine kind of being in the background. That's where I'm most comfortable, even though I seem like an extrovert, but I'm an introverted extrovert. And I'm fine with just putting stuff out there. That's why the Jack Wild thing is kind of nice. Just like, okay, this is, I can kind of hide behind it a little bit. But Yeah, it's not changed my life in any major way, but it is really, humbling and honoring for people. I've had people send quotes from the book or chapters, and they're like, "This touched me, like, this really got me right here. This is my favorite quote. This is my favorite chapter. I can't put this one down," and I'm really that's amazing to me, and I mean, I wanted to believe in the work, and I wanted to think, "Oh, this is good," but I did a lot of checking, like, thinking, like, "Is this really are people gonna how are they gonna take this?" And after a while, you just it's okay, you know? But no, besides that, it impacted somebody is really a cool thing. My 2 goals were to become a published author, which I did, and if this is all I ever do, then I'm ecstatic, and the other thing is to help one person with the book, and that's, change their life for the positive, and I use my hands, so I keep hitting the phone. The, and if I can do that, those are my tiny little goals, and I've already met those, I've already had people reach out and say, like there's one of my friends said, I got teary-eyed, Shawn. He's like, "I haven't really thought about my 12-year-old self for years," and I got sad about that. And I'm like, "Well, then keep reading because it's not about, like, you terrible person, how dare you neglect yourself?" And this is about a journey for yourself, and then not just it's yourself, and once you figure that out, then you can start taking that journey with other people. So that's what makes it a movement.
It does, it does. It's an inspiration. Like I said, I loved it. My editor, as I was sending her each chapter, she's like, "Oh my god, Erin, this is so good. Does he's a first-time author?" I was like, "No, he really is, and he's awesome." So, we were both just flabbergasted at the inspiration in the words. It was amazing. So,
Yeah.
you definitely have something special there. So, plot twist radio is all about the unexpected turns. So, what's the biggest plot twist of your own creative life so far?
And you and I talked about this. As I was allowing myself to do this over the past few years, and then I have on my, account to, write the books and format them and all that stuff, I have 8 books that are just sitting there, and some of them are just, have some outlines and maybe the chapter 1 and acknowledgments and then just so I could put them in reality. And I have, actually started like these characters started walking into my life, whether it was to dream them or have a daydream. I told my son, I said, "I got this character. I cannot get out of my head. His name's Wyatt." And, it's Wyatt Quinn now, I've named him. And I said, "He's this old dusty cowboy that's a minister, and we sit down by a fire and he offers me a cup of coffee, and then we just sit down and he tells me all these amazing stories about the old West, Cherokee Indians, and which I have some Cherokee in my background." And, he's like, "Yeah, that's really cool." And so I started using my oldest son, as the inspiration. And then after that, these other characters, my daughter inspired me to create this character. And so I've got my oldest son's in the Old West, and my youngest daughter's in ancient Greece, and my oldest daughter's gonna be in the future, and my other son's gonna be in a medieval knight. And I'm like, I got these 4 stories that just kind of separately are coming at me, and I think about, "Oh my gosh, that's what their personality's like," and use my youngest son is such a very confident, overconfident, I'll say overconfident, and humorous kid. And then I picture this character, and I have names for him. I won't spoil all that. But I asked you, I'm like, Erin, I got all these people coming in and out, and like it's like they're telling me stories. Am I losing my mind? And you're like, no, you've just allowed yourself to turn on that faucet or to open your heart and open your that ability. No, no, you're an author. And when you said that to me, it was like I just felt like somebody hit me in the head, like, duh, so that has been probably the biggest plot twist is that like, oh, I knew I was a creative, and I've always been a creator and an educator in these things. People told me one time I'm a teacher, and I was like, "Oh, I'm a teacher, really?" I didn't think of myself as a teacher, but it's just one of those things that just in me to try to help. I read rooms very well and energy levels, all that kind of stuff. Um, People you say, I was the patient whisperer, like, how do you know what to say and the right time to say it? And I'm like, I don't know. I've just always been able to do this since I was a kid. I always want the energy. I don't like, energy's got to be what it's going to be. Sometimes it's high, sometimes it's tense, sometimes it's low. But I always wanted it to. I'm kind of that mediator. Like, let's bring this down. Let's get everybody comfortable. Let's get everybody safe. Kind of feeling. And I know that's not always reality, but like aftermath of terrible things, it's like, okay, how do we start cobbling this back together? And like I said, so writing is to me, it's just like the next, like without a doubt, chapter of my life, and pun intended. But it's just something that I should have seen coming, and I should have seen the writing on the wall, but I didn't. And so, but it's been a very pleasant surprise.
Yes. And you have a lot of stories left, so I cannot wait for the next one. It's been an honor working with you, it really has. But can you tell the listeners where they can find you?
Well, that's the other. One of these days, I probably need to have like a some kind of a website and all that kind of stuff. But I'm on social media, Facebook. I have my own account, just Shawn Layman. And then I'm on Instagram, and it is. I'm so terrible at these. I really need to get better at this stuff. I think it's Shawn Layman 58 right now. But I need to get some Jack Wylde stuff out there, so I don't really have all that. I'm also on. Oh shoot, I'm drawing a blank. But I do have my own author page. Shoot, help me with that one.
Yeah. It's on Crew Fiction, correct?
True fiction, yeah. Sorry. I
Too.
felt like they even said to me and said something about, we really, emphasize just fiction, all this stuff. I'm like, "I'm getting to it, I promise. I'm getting to it."
Yeah.
But yeah, about crew fiction as well. So, yeah, I'm trying to get better at all those contacts. But yeah, so I'm out there in the social media land, pretty easy to and accessible. But yeah, I'll get a little bit better with some of my Jack Wild stuff too as the years go, and as the books go too, right?
Yes. It takes time. Honestly, social media is such a complex monster.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's hard to keep up with each of them. Sean, thank you so much. This has been super fun.
Hey, no, I appreciate you right back, Aaron.
Take care.
You too.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay.
That was my conversation with the great Shawn Layman, also known as Jack Wylde. And if you felt even a little spark while listening to him talk about imagination, creativity, and coming back to yourself, take that as your sign to follow it. His book is The Age of Imagination, Awakening the Dreamer Within. And it's one of those reads that doesn't just entertain, it reminds you who you were before life got loud. You can find Shawn online on Facebook under Shawn Layman, and you can also find his author page and book over at Crew Fiction. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe to Plot Twist Radio wherever you're listening. Leave a quick review and share it with a friend who needs a little permission to pick their creativity back up again. And as always, thank you for spending part of your day with me. I'm Erin, and this has been Plot Twist Radio, where life doesn't always go by the book, and that's usually where the best stories begin.